All right, we're at the top of the hour. Welcome, everybody, to the Sales Development Webinar Series. Stop Kissing Frogs, How Your Prospecting Success Starts at the Top. I'm David Dulany, your host, here with Jonathan Spier, CEO and founder of Rev. John, how are you doing today?
Hey, I'm terrific. Nice to be here down in from San Diego, and thanks for having me, David.
Yeah, I'm super excited to talk with you about this. You know, we see these issues in the sales development community all the time that we'll be talking about today. And, you know, my friend Ryan Reisert likes to say, your list is your strategy. And it makes so much sense because it's where sales development reps are spending so much time at that very, very top of the funnel. And, you know, they're kissing a lot of frogs, right? So we see that all the time with especially the outbound SDR, you know, programs. Where I want to dive in, tell us about Rev and what you're working on there and kind of set the context for the problem that you're trying to solve.
Yeah, sure. My pleasure. You know, you talk about that, you know, your list is your strategy, and you talk about the very top of the funnel. We have a word for that. We call it above the funnel. We call it that part before you know who you're supposed to talk to in the first place. And we see a lot of folks struggling there, and it's been our mission to help. We think that is super important. You know, every step you take above the funnel is either right or wrong, depending on whether you're talking to the right people to begin with. And so that's really where we focus.
Yeah, and you know, your list of the people that you're helping is unbelievable. I mean, it's kind of like the best kept secret in sales development to some extent, because you know, it seems like a lot of folks right now, it's sort of an awareness piece where people are trying to solve this issue and they don't even realize. Rev just, you know, you changed your name recently from Lead Crunch. So folks have probably heard of Lead Crunch, but, you know, Rev has a lot of deep experience working with some great customers.
Yeah, the company's been going about 7 years, has built some pretty incredible AI technology for, you know, solving this kind of problem we're going to talk about today. And you know, we're really grateful for the customers who trust us and the folks we work with. But you know, what we hear from every one of them, it's just so consistent, is that there just haven't been great tools for this above the funnel challenge. And you know, in a sense, like over 25 years, we've gotten so much better in B2B selling and marketing. We've gotten specialty teams and specialty software for every level of the funnel. And it's almost amazing, actually, that, you know, we have CRM. We're so good at, you know, knowing what's in pipe, and ABM, we know what's, you know, how to nurture and mid-funnel management, everything else. And the SAM tools are fantastic. But there really need to be tools and support for that area above the funnel. And from all those customers that we work with and from other folks we talk to, we just keep hearing again and again that sales development, in a sense, has been undervalued relative to its importance in the company, because it's so important.
You on that? Yeah,
definitely. It's so important. Right? It's so important who you feed into the funnel, and you know, it makes your whole funnel better and more efficient if you're talking to the right folks. And conversely, you know, if you're talking to the wrong folks, then it gets awfully hard to justify, you know, hey, you had some meetings, you had some appointments, like the progress feels good, but not really, not ultimately, not if they don't result in great qualified opportunities for the sales team. So we hear that again and again, and that's what we talk about as the need above the funnel, and it's really where we play.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we hear a lot, is that you know, in the sales development department, they're given the tools to do the outreach. And obviously that's almost like table stakes. And then that feeds into the CRM. And there's great data out there as far as the cleanliness of the data, you know, so you can get pretty good names and emails and phone numbers. But then where the SDRs spend a lot of their times is trying to just sort out and prioritize that top of the funnel, you know, and then even if they're not focused on the you know, the right accounts and folks that work at those accounts, then they might be setting up appointments that don't translate to pipeline. And so it seems like that is, a huge opportunity to try to help and sort that out, so they're not kissing frogs, right?
It's exactly right. I mean, when we talk to companies, we're hearing that SDRs spend, up to half their time just doing research.
Yeah.
And it's the right thing to do, because outreach is so much more effective when it's personalized. In a way, you have to do that research in order to have a personalized approach. But it's also incredibly time consuming. And your best SDRs know how to do that. The best SDRs, have a clear view of the ideal customer profile. And then they match and they do a bunch of research to find people who look like that ICP. But, two problems. One is that takes a ton of time. And second is, the folks who maybe aren't the very best SDRs, when you hire someone fresh out of school and you throw them in the chair and you say, go, but without more tools and support than that, if all they have is a contact database, then, they just don't know how to do it, right? They don't know how to prioritize to make sure they're spending the right time, like you say, to spend the right part of the list, so that ultimately the contact they made are with the right people to begin with. And it's everything you expect would happen, right? It's hit and miss, it's spray and pray, it's inconsistent. And it's why, unfortunately, a lot of times SDRs don't make the quota, or they're kind of looked at as not succeeding, when the problem really isn't them or their effort. The problem is that they've been undersupplied, relative to their importance, undersupplied with tools and a systematic approach to really help them.
Yeah, and it's that first mile problem. So you could have data, different sources, even inbound leads, but where they spend a lot of their time is just trying to sort everything, research, get it prioritized, reach out, and then you're still at the end of the first mile at that point. So there's so much time has been spent just in that research stage that you haven't even started talking to the customer, the prospect yet.
You got it. We say that, no matter where you're going, if you walk the first mile in the wrong direction, right, you're wasting your time. You got to come back and walk it all over again. And that's what we're trying to solve, is get you a more relevant contact list and prospect list to begin with.
Yeah, and you call it like an SDP. So how do you define SDP?
Yeah, it's really, we think that sales development reps, SDRs, SDR teams need a sales development platform. And it's a platform that's really built for this purpose, to organize the work above the funnel, which really has three pieces. One is discovery, right? How do you find net new prospects who are relevant to your ICP? And how do you do it instantly and automatically, so you don't have to spend half your time doing research? And second is scoring, because it's one thing to have a list, but another thing to have a scored, prioritized list. And that could be, whether they're net new or whether folks already on your call list. It's knowing who to go at first and who to maybe deprioritize. And then it's routing, because using that scoring lets you make some smarter decisions and say, here's the portion of the list that's worth, extra effort to go and personalize and approach. And then there's maybe other parts of the list that you put them on your monthly flow, your weekly flow, whatever else it is, with less personalization. But it's those three pieces that make up the SDP. It's discovery, scoring, and routing that we're bringing to bear with the platform.
Got it. Okay, so if we're newer to this, how does something like this work in the background? Because it seems like if you're trying to do it yourself, you can do it and definitely focus on this, but there's got to be machine learning and AI that can help.
Yeah, I think it's the big reason this hasn't been done before is finally now the technology with AI has matured enough to really help make a big difference in this problem. AI is getting a ton of hype out there, and it should be. It's a powerful technology, but I think that it's worth it to have a simple definition. And what we say AI is all about is just pattern matching. And the same way Google Maps or Waze can help you, find what roads to take to get to a destination, we're using AI to help find what companies match your ICP. So the way it works is a company enters a list of their ideal customers. And it really is that simple. It can be a list as few as 20 or 30 customers that you say, maybe you've signed them already, maybe you haven't. You say, these are the ones that we think are perfect. And from that, we will build in less than 5 minutes a mathematical model of the characteristics that unite and keep those companies in common. It's an ICP. We call it, actually, because it's an AI customer profile, we call it an AICP. And what we've done is we build this living mathematical model. It's always on, it's always up to date, and it really captures the key criteria of your target segment so that you can ask at any time, give me the next best prospect. Give me the next 10, give me the next 100, give me the scores for these new inbounds that just arrived. All those kinds of things you can ask that model, and it's always there, instantly providing the answers.
Okay, and so when people are trying to solve this, there's outbound. So there's like the cold list, there's the cold universe of potential customers. And then they've also got this, a lot of companies has a treasure trove of inbound, data and people that actually reach out. They may or may not be qualified. How do you think about, outbound versus inbound, or is it all sort of one mega list?
Yeah, great question. It's really a similar kind of goal, which is whether you're doing the outbound prospecting or inbound, or in a way the near bound. Near bound's the list that marketing already has. It's the ABM, and you kind of think they're right. It's the same challenge as you want to match and say, are these people really a fit for the ICP? And you should do that before you spend the time and effort to engage. The way we do that is this concept we call Exographic. So this is really the sort of secret sauce that, some of which is on the whiteboard behind me. But it's what hasn't existed in the past. If all you have to work with is firmographics, and you go into a regular kind of contact database with firmographics, there's too many companies that are firmographic twins. They're the same industry, the same basic size in employees, and the same basic revenue. So you can't learn anything to differentiate those companies to be able to assess, do they match your ICP or not? What we do with AI is we identify these signals we call exographics, which are things like whether they're an early adopter or a late adopter of new technology, whether they invest heavily in compliance or cybersecurity, whether they do B2C marketing or B2B marketing. All those kinds of details are knowable. They're out there. Companies, put information about themselves out there all the time on their own website, on LinkedIn and job postings, in who their people are. And we have over 500 of these different exographic signals to build those AICPs and help make those distinctions to score for outbound or inbound prospecting.
I mean, that's crazy. Like, I'm just trying to think how, if somebody's using something like what you're describing versus me, SDR manager, like trying to do that for the team. It feels like me going up against the, San Francisco 49er, like, running back team or something. I mean, it seems like such a huge, jump to go from trying to do something manually to leveraging the technology that's out there. So how do different teams use it?
Well, I mean, David, we haven't met in person, but I'd give you some credit and say you might do fine on the football field. But
we definitely haven't met in person.
Fair enough. What it really comes down to is, is that aspect of, prospecting, especially on the SDR side. There's uses in the demand gen team and in the marketing team, because really all teams, doing discovery and doing go to market, have the similar needs to prioritize and do that matching that prioritize. But what it really comes down to on the sales side in particular is, saving a ton of time in doing that research, because you can hone in faster on the criteria that matter for your key, profile, your ICP or your AICP. So I can give some examples. We work with some companies that deal a lot in cybersecurity, and it's a fantastic space. It's a growth space, but it's also in a way a challenging space, because tons and tons of companies need what they do, and that means kind of by definition it's this very broad market. And being able to get to the next level in Exographics and say, I want to find the companies that are making certain kind of investments. Maybe they're big into compliance, or they're big into certain technologies, more than their peers. It's discoverable. You can do that if you do enough really smart research, but it's something that we make so much faster that it really just saves time for the SDR so that they don't have to do that research, and they can spend more of their time doing really quality and engagement.
Yeah.
That's really the goal. And on this sales column where we talk about the different use cases here of how people use us, there's kind of two general modes that are most common. One is the sales development leader will construct lists for their people. And they might do that once a month or once a quarter, whatever the frequency is. And they say, we're just going to do the research. We're going to build an AICP and just spit off target lists. So our people are always working the most prioritized, most relevant list. And the second is when the SDRs themselves, or even AEs, use us as an outbound prospecting tool. And both of those things are built into the system, where it can be done by the leader, or it can be done by the individual rep. But in both times, saving that research time, it's saving time for engagement.
Yeah, and I just think when you talk to a lot of SDR leaders, the depth of thinking about the list, it really goes to accounts, the people that work at the accounts, the common pain points, and then maybe how their product solves it. I mean, that's essentially, there's only those four things. And then, like you said, they're helping to create a list once a week or once a month. And I would, challenge everybody to think deeper on what are the trigger points and the different exographic, as you call it, the different exographic activities that could make them more interested in having a conversation. And challenge to try to find at least 2 or 3 of those. Because like you said, cybersecurity, perfect example. A couple of years ago, you go to the RSA conference here in San Francisco before COVID, and there was over 600 cybersecurity vendors. And each of them had SDR teams. And each of them was calling on the same group of buyers. So if you can't stand out and you can't double click further to get information, you're really going to be left behind to some extent.
Yeah, you're exactly right. That exographics is really important. Actually, do you mind coming back to the last slide?
Yeah.
Tim? It's for things like, let's just say early adopter or late adopter. We ask, customers sometimes, which one's more important? Which would you rather sell to?
Yeah.
And the answer is it just depends. It depends on what you're selling, right? Cat, it seems to be a company that adopts early technology faster. And if you're selling something really cutting edge, your blockchain technology, whatever else, they might be a better target. But I've talked to companies selling, telephone equipment and e-fax equipment, and they might prefer a company that's a mid-late adopter, that's still heavy telephone based, whatever else it might be. It's the key thing is that you identify those characteristics. And this is just, for this particular slide, we have 3 exographic lenses listed: the early adopter, cloud adoption, and B2C versus B2B. But we have over 500 of those different signals. And they're super important because first, you're identifying the characteristics of the company you want to talk to. But second is it leads straight to personalization, because you probably shouldn't approach an early adopter with the exact same message as a late adopter. They're just going to respond to different things because they care, for different reasons. Sometimes we even fall into the trap of, finding an early adopter in a late adopting company. You want a message that's going to appeal to the whole company. You don't want to reach one person when you feel like you're getting traction and you have a great first response, but then their organization's going to shut it down anyhow. The point is the SDRs are going to be way more effective if they know who they're dealing with on the other side, because those attributes of the ideal customer.
That's so true. And as a matter of fact, a guy asked me yesterday to fax him something. I'm not making this up. So, and I was floored. I wanted to write back and say, this is 2021, not 1998, because I remember when so, to your point, if we're calling on a company that faxes things back and forth, we're not going to want to talk about, AI, blockchain, NFTs or something like that, right?
There are a lot of companies out there, and that's, look, it's an exciting time to be in a lot of our industries. A lot of the folks that obviously you work with and we work with are on the tech space, and there's so much new technology, and there's so many companies out there adopting technology. It's an exciting time, but there's a lot of different flavors of folks out there. There's people still faxing, and maybe they're a good customer too, but yeah, it does surprise sometimes, right?
We'll call them a mid to late adopter as one of our signals.
Could be fair.
It could be. Now, this is really interesting. So this is how you actually, I mean, behind the scenes, you're plotting out where they land on the exographic lookalike.
Yeah, it's just one visualization of it. And I think, Dave, we had a chance, and I showed you some of the other screens of our platform, but this is one it's an auto-generated graphic where a company's AICP shows them, who are the ideal matches in this 5-star, 4-star, kind of down to 1-star kind of way. And we talk about them almost in a sports analogy. So your 5-star recruits are the ones that are worth the most time. Those are the ones that get the custom, touch, that maybe you do a little more research, you use the exographics, you tailor the message. Maybe your 4 stars are the ones that go into an existing flow and they get hit once a month or whatever the flow might be, but aren't going to be quite as relevant a match to your ideal customer, and so don't get the same amount of effort, and all the way out. And what's amazing about this is how often we work with companies, and we actually map on top of this. The platform does it automatically, who they're already marketing to. And invariably what you see, like in this scatter plot here, what you're seeing is there's companies at the far flung, edge of the bullseye. What that means is companies are spending good time and good money researching and engaging with people that really don't look at all like their ideal customer. What's that mean? It's really, there's two things. Like, first is that time and effort, whether it's an SDR team or marketing dollars, whatever else, in a way it's wasted, because those people are very much less likely to buy. You're just gonna get way better conversion by focusing towards the center of the bullseye. But worse than that, and we are just huge believers that the SDR function matters, that it matters even more than it's been given credit for, because it's the gateway to the whole funnel. And even worse than, in a sense, wasting time with someone who might not buy, is that those people could engage and could enter the funnel. And there's this old, saying, garbage in, garbage out. But unfortunately, it's not true in the sales funnel. What tends to happen is garbage in, and garbage just sits there and clogs up the funnel, forever. But those are the ones that linger, and they sit and they gum up the forecast. And you can't tell who's really going to close because those deals are just sitting there. And so we think that an approach that uses this kind of information from the start, it just ups the hit rate, makes everyone more successful right to begin with, and makes the whole pipeline better.
Yeah, and there's so much optimization, potential there at the top of the funnel that hasn't really been focused on. And I just got a question that came in, Jonathan. Is this usually a marketing analysis? I think what that means is, in your experience working with customers, is it usually a marketing team that is running this and then feeding it into the SDRs, or is it usually led by an SDR leader, or kind of both?
It's for sure both, and it sort of seems to vary company by company, whether sort of marketing really thinks first about targeting, or whether the sales organization on their own is doing it. Mm-hmm. But what we're seeing is that more and more often, the SDR leaders in particular are taking ownership of some of this kind of stuff. At the end of the day, they're evaluated, and their success or their failure as an SDR leader is, how effective the SDRs are at creating great qualified opportunities. And, getting appointments, activity is good, appointments is better, qualified opportunities are even better, but the best is when those qualified opportunities actually look like your ICP and are going to end up closing. And so we see more and more SDR leaders, sales development leaders, taking an interest and wanting to make sure their people are properly targeted. So I'd say the answer is both, but increasingly SDR leadership as opposed to marketing.
Yeah, you could see that, in the new generation of the SDR leader, they're almost like a connective tissue, between the marketing and the sales team. And they sort of act as they've sort of got one foot in each side of the equation, in that they're helping and, with the marketing and the demand generation, and then sorting and prioritizing that, enabling their team with the best possible processes, and then handing that over to sales as qualified opportunities in a perfect world, right? But, there's a lot of accidents and opportunities for improvement of the process throughout that chain of command. So
we actually think it's an opportunity for the sales development function to really step up as a strategic weapon for the company. Because rather than just kind of showing activity, right? Go show activity that's actually targeted, that actually drives toward the right results that the company really wants. It's making strategic market development, right, a function that's more important. And we think a lot of companies want that and need that from the sales development function, although they might not realize it yet. But we talk to more and more SDRs that do realize it, because they know that in the end, the success is measured that way. So why wouldn't you want to be more accurate and effective in your upfront targeting?
Yeah, and that's just a question that I have, Jonathan, is where do you see the SDR sort of industry going over the next couple of years? Because I think it's sort of looked at as an entry-level position where you do it for a couple of years and you move on, and there's very few, as far as I've seen, SDR leaders who have like a seat at the executive table, and have influence like that. But at the same time, I agree that, it's the new way of thinking and integrating all these processes to make them an important business driver. Looking into your crystal ball, where do you see the whole thing going?
I think that the sales development function needs to and will become more strategic. The reality is opening the doors to new customers and new markets is critically important, and most companies aren't that great at it. Even if central marketing is fantastic at the core product line, the first product set, kind of core segment, things start to get a little squishy the farther out you go. Add another product line, maybe the ICP isn't exactly the same, and things start to get less on target real fast. And that's true when you add product lines, and it's true when you add market segments. There needs to be a strategic guidance function saying, we're going to deploy people smartly, because that's what the SDR function and sales development function is best at. It's targeted, it's researched, it's smart, because that's how you open doors, is by being targeted like that. And we think that's a strategic function to the company, and will be more and more going forward. So when a company says, we have a new market segment we want to penetrate, they know that the best way to do that is to go engage the sales development function to go do a strategic, assault on that segment. And that's going to be way more effective than just hosing a bunch of money at display ads, towards a segment that really isn't accustomed to thinking of you that way. Go at with a personalized approach. And you're in the space, David. What do you think?
I completely agree. I mean, I just think of some stat that like 40% of venture capital goes to Google and Facebook ads or something like that. And it's like, at some point, you've got to start to think differently. And I think emphasizing the strategic importance of sales development. Of course, I'm biased. We're a research and advisory firm that focuses. So I hope what you're saying is true. The other quick thing is that we see inverted supply and demand for senior SDR leaders. Like, there's companies that are hiring for VPs of sales development and SVPs of sales development, and they cannot find anybody to do this because it's such a rare position. And so if you think of market supply and demand, the salaries are getting crazy. I mean, at least in the tech hubs. And so if anybody's, getting discouraged. These are skills that can pay off in droves over the next few years, because there's not a lot of people that can do this successfully. So.
Oh, for sure. Especially once they're enabled with a better tool set. But we just went through this ourselves. We found a great sales development leader to really extend our function, obviously powered by our own platform and doing both the inbound and the outbound work on our own platform. But I think in a way it's been, as I mentioned all the way up at the beginning, it's been a function that's undervalued relative to its importance. And what I mean is there's a certain acceptance that we're going to hire, relatively more junior people, and that a bunch of the time there's going to be, not that much success from some of them. It just doesn't need to be that way. This is the strategic assault function on new segments and new markets, or on important accounts. And the more we understand that, and we enable the function with good tools for strategic targeting, then the more important the function is, the more success you're having, the more that success we're going to see from individual SDRs, because they're enabled. They're not just thrown out into the wilderness, with a compass and a canteen and well wishes.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that you're blazing a trail with what Rev is doing at that top of the funnel, and I'm just excited to see the developments that happen, because you hit right on a major problem. There's a lot of people kissing frogs out there for sure. So,
well, thanks. It's been fun to meet your team. I think when we first met your team, we could tell that we're all thinking about it exactly the same way. You all from a services and research and enablement standpoint. I know you've done great work for the whole function in the market, and we're really impressed. And obviously it was simpatico. We met and we all see things the same way, which is great.
Yeah, I'm super excited. So let's keep the conversation going, everybody. We have the Tenbound conference coming up on October 27th, which is a high level. It's in person, very strict protocols. You can wear a hazmat suit if you want to, but we're doing it live, and we're going to keep these conversations going. Jonathan, this has been so fascinating. Can't wait to see what happens with Rev, and let's do it again soon.
Can't wait. Thanks, David.